He built an empire on silence and power. She disappeared with his sons. 4 years later, he sees them in the park. 3 boys with his face, laughing in her arms. She never told him. He never knew he was a father. Now, his fiancée stands beside him. And the mother of his children stands across the world he destroyed. 1 glance. 3 heartbeats. And everything he thought he controlled just shattered. This is the story of the man who ruled the underworld, until the past came back with tiny hands and his own eyes. The spring air smelled like cherry blossoms and lies. Daehan walked through Riverside Park with Minji's hand in his, her diamond ring catching the late afternoon sun like a tiny cold star. She spoke about wedding venues. He wasn't listening. He never really listened to Minji. She was perfect for him. Poised, elegant, the daughter of a businessman who understood that empires weren't built on love. They were built on alliances, and Daehan's empire was vast. At 35, he controlled the Korean underground from New York to Los Angeles. His name was whispered in rooms where men made fortunes disappear and enemies vanish. He didn't carry guns. He didn't need to. His silence was sharper than any blade. When he entered a room, breathing changed. When he spoke, decisions were made. But none of that mattered when he saw her. She was standing near the fountain, her back to him, her laughter floating across the park like a song he'd forgotten he knew. 4 years. 4 years since she'd walked out of his life without explanation, without goodbye, leaving only an empty apartment and a note that said, "I'm sorry." He'd searched for her. For months, he'd torn the city apart looking for Zara. Then he'd stopped. Because men like him didn't chase ghosts. They moved forward. They rebuilt. They married women like Minji who understood that love was a luxury, not a necessity. But now she was here. And she wasn't alone. 3 little boys ran circles around her, their laughter bright and wild. They couldn't have been more than 4 years old. One of them stumbled, and she caught him with the kind of grace that made Daehan's chest tighten. She kissed the top of his head, smoothed his dark hair, whispered something that made the child giggle. Daehan's feet stopped moving. Minji tugged his hand. "Are you all right?" He didn't answer, because he was staring at the boys' faces. They were identical, all 3 of them. Dark eyes, sharp jawlines even at that age. The same serious expression he saw in the mirror every morning when the world hadn't woken up yet. They looked exactly like him. His heart, a muscle he'd trained to feel nothing, slammed against his ribs like it was trying to escape. No, it couldn't be. One of the boys turned, and for a split second, their eyes met across the park. The child tilted his head, curious, fearless. Then Zara called his name. "Minho," and the boy ran back to her, crashing into her legs with the kind of trust that only children have. Daehan's world tilted. Minho, Junho, Tayo. He didn't know their names yet. But he would. He would learn everything. Because those boys weren't just children playing in a park. They were his. Minji was still talking. Something about floral arrangements. He pulled his hand away. "I need a moment." "Daehan." But he was already walking. His bodyguards shifted in the periphery, shadows trained to follow. But he raised a hand and they stopped. This wasn't something guns could solve. This wasn't business. This was something far more dangerous. Zara hadn't seen him yet. She was crouched down, wiping dirt off one of the boy's knees, her voice soft and steady. She wore a simple dress, nothing like the expensive things he used to buy her. Her hair was longer. Her face was the same. Warm, alive, everything his world wasn't. And she'd kept his sons from him. He stopped 10 feet away. She must have felt his presence because she froze. Slowly she looked up. Their eyes met. And for a moment, the city disappeared. The park. The noise. Minji. The empire. All of it collapsed into the space between them. Into the 4 years of silence. Into the 3 small heartbeats that proved she'd carried a part of him all this time. Her face went pale. "Daehan, His name on her lips felt like a knife and a kiss at the same time. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. He just stood there, a man who controlled everything, utterly powerless in the face of 3 little boys who had his eyes. One of the triplets tugged on Zara's dress. "Mommy, who's that?" She didn't answer. Dehan's gaze dropped to the children, then back to her. And in the softest, most dangerous voice he'd ever used, he said, "We need to talk." She didn't run. He'd expected her to. 4 years ago, Zara had been good at running. But now she just stood there, her hand resting protectively on one of the boys' shoulders, her eyes wide and frightened and defiant all at once. "Not here," she whispered. "Then where?" She glanced at the children. They were watching him with open curiosity, the kind only kids had before the world taught them to be afraid. One of them, Minho maybe, stepped forward. "Are you a friend of Mommy's?" Dehan's throat closed. A friend. He crouched down slowly, bringing himself to the child's level. Up close, it was undeniable. The boy had his nose, his serious mouth. Even the way he stood, feet slightly apart, chin up, was familiar in a way that made Dehan's hands shake. "Yes," Dehan said quietly. "I'm an old friend." Minho considered this. Then he smiled. "Mommy doesn't have many friends." "Minho." Zara's voice was sharp, gentle, terrified. The boy looked back at her, confused, then shrugged and ran off to join his brothers by the swings. Dehan stood slowly. When he looked at Zara again, his expression was unreadable. Cold. The mask he wore when making men beg for mercy. "How old are they?" She swallowed. "Dehan." "How old?" 4. The math was simple, brutal. She'd been pregnant when she left. She'd known. She'd carried his children and never said a word. Why? It was the only question that mattered. Zara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She'd always been strong like that. It was one of the things he'd loved about her. One of the things that made losing her feel like losing a limb. "Because you would have kept me," she whispered. "You would have locked me in that world. And I couldn't. Dehan. I couldn't raise them in that. I couldn't let them grow up thinking power and fear were love." He took a step closer. She didn't back away. "So you stole them from me." "I saved them from you." The words hit harder than any bullet. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then he laughed, a low, bitter sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Saved them. By making them fatherless. By letting them think I didn't exist. You don't exist, Dehan. Not in their world. They have a life. A safe life. Play dates and school and bedtime stories. Not bodyguards and bloodstains and... Enough." His voice cut through hers like glass. She stopped. He looked past her, at the 3 boys playing on the swings. They were laughing, shoving each other, completely unaware that their entire world was about to change. "Do they know?" he asked quietly. "Know what?" "That I'm their father." Zara's silence was answer enough. Dehan closed his eyes, breathed. When he opened them again, the crime lord was back. The man who didn't feel. The man who made decisions that ruined lives. "You have 2 choices," he said softly. "You tell them, or I do." "Dehan, please." "I'm not asking, Zara." She flinched. Behind him, Minji's voice called out, "Dehan, is everything all right?" He didn't turn around. Zara's gaze flicked past him, landing on the elegant woman in designer heels, the massive engagement ring, the perfect composure. Her face changed. Something broke in her expression. "You're engaged." It wasn't a question. He nodded once. "Then why does this matter?" Zara's voice cracked. "You moved on. You have a life. Let me have mine. Because they're mine." 3 words. Absolute. Final. Zara shook her head, tears finally spilling over. "You can't just... I can. And I will." Minho ran back over, oblivious to the tension. "Mommy, can we get ice cream?" Zara wiped her eyes quickly, forcing a smile. "Soon, baby." Daehan reached into his jacket. Zara stiffened, but he only pulled out a business card. He held it out to her. Tomorrow, noon. The address is on the back. She didn't take it. He set it on the bench beside her. If you don't come, he said quietly, I'll find you anyway. You know I will. Then he turned and walked away. Minji met him halfway, concern etched on her perfect face. Who was that? No one. But as they left the park, Daehan looked back once. Zara was holding all 3 boys now, whispering something to them, her face buried in their hair. And for the first time in 4 years, Daehan felt something he thought he'd killed a long time ago. He felt human. She didn't sleep. Zara sat in the tiny apartment she shared with the boys, the business card on the table in front of her like a grenade with the pin pulled. Midnight came and went. The city hummed outside, indifferent to the war happening in her chest. She'd known this day would come, eventually, somehow. But she'd hoped. God, she'd hoped. In the other room, the triplets slept in their shared bed, tangled together like puppies. Minho's arm was slung over Taeho's stomach. Junho snored softly. They were safe, happy, innocent. Everything she'd sacrificed 4 years of her life to protect. And now Daehan knew. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the memories from flooding back. But they came anyway. They always did. She'd been 28 when they met, working 2 jobs, barely scraping by. And then he walked into the small cafe where she waitressed on weekends. He didn't look like the other customers. Too sharp, too still. When he ordered coffee, his voice was quiet, but everyone in the room felt it. She should have been afraid. Instead, she smiled and asked if he wanted cream. For 6 months, he came back every Sunday. Same table, same order. And slowly, impossibly, the most dangerous man she'd ever met became the softest. With her, he laughed. With her, he let the mask slip. He told her about his childhood in Seoul, about coming to America with nothing, about building an empire because it was the only way to survive. And she loved him. God help her, she loved him. But love wasn't enough when she found out what that empire was built on. When she saw the fear in people's eyes when he walked into a room. When she realized the man who kissed her so gently at night was the same man who made people disappear. She'd tried to leave once. He found her in 6 hours. You don't get to run from me, he'd said, his hand gentle on her face, his eyes absolutely cold. You're mine, Zara, and I protect what's mine. That's when she knew. He wouldn't let her go. Not ever. And if she told him about the pregnancy, he'd lock her away somewhere safe and suffocating, and their children would grow up in a golden cage, learning that power was love and fear was loyalty. So she ran again. This time, she was smarter. She cut her hair, changed her name, moved 3 times in 6 months. And when the boys were born, tiny, perfect, 3 pieces of the man she'd loved and lost, she held them and promised they'd never know his world. But promises were fragile things, and Daehan was very good at breaking fragile things. At 11:45 the next morning, Zara stood outside the address on the card. It was a private office building in Manhattan, the kind where men in expensive suits made deals that changed the world. She almost turned around. But then she thought of Minho's question yesterday. Mommy, why were you crying? She'd lied, said she had dust in her eyes. He'd hugged her anyway. She couldn't keep lying. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like falling. When the doors opened, a woman in a sleek black suit greeted her with a cool smile. Miss Okafor, he's expecting you. Zara followed her down a hallway lined with abstract art and floor-to-ceiling windows. At the end, a set of double doors opened into an office that looked more like a throne room. And there he was. Daehan stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city like he owned it. Maybe he did. The assistant left without a word. The doors clicked shut. Silence. Finally, he turned. He looked exactly the same. Older, maybe. Harder. But those eyes, those dark, Endless eyes that used to look at her like she was the only real thing in his world. They were the same. "You came," he said softly. "I didn't have a choice." A faint smile. "You always have a choice, Zara. You just don't always like the options." She stayed by the door, arms crossed. "What do you want?" "I want to know my sons." "No." He raised an eyebrow. "No? They don't know you. They don't need to. You have your life. Let me have mine." He moved toward her slowly, each step deliberate. She wanted to back away. She didn't. When he was close enough to touch, he stopped. "Do you remember what you said the last night we were together?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. She remembered. Of course she remembered. "I'll love you even when it kills me." "You left anyway," he continued. "You took everything that mattered, and you vanished. I looked for you, Zara. For months. I tore the city apart, and when I couldn't find you, I thought you were dead." Her breath caught. "I thought I'd lost you forever," he whispered, "and I learned to live with it. I built a life without you. I found someone who fits my world, and I told myself I was fine." He leaned in, just slightly. "Then I saw you yesterday, and I realized I'd been lying to myself for 4 years. Dehan, they're mine." His voice broke on the words. "Those boys are mine, and you kept them from me. To protect them." "From what? From me?" "Yes." The word hung between them like a gunshot. He stepped back, jaw tight. "You think I'm a monster," he said flatly. "I think you're a man who built a kingdom on fear, and I won't let my sons become princes of that kingdom." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he walked to his desk, pulled out a folder, and handed it to her. She opened it. Inside were legal documents, custody papers, DNA test requests. Her hands shook. "I could take them from you," Dehan said quietly. "I have the money, the lawyers, the power. I could make you disappear and no one would question it." She looked up, terrified. He met her gaze. "But I won't." She blinked. "I'm giving you a choice," he continued. "Let me into their lives. Let me be their father. Or fight me in court and lose everything. That's not a choice. It's the only one you're getting." Zara's eyes burned. "I hate you. I know. I'll never forgive you for this. I don't need forgiveness." He moved closer again, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I just need them." And for the first time since she'd run, Zara realized something terrifying. He wasn't going to let this go. Not now, not ever. Because Dehan didn't lose. And he'd just found something worth winning. The meeting with his lawyers happened 3 days later. Dehan sat at the head of a mahogany table that cost more than most people's cars, listening to 3 of the best attorneys in New York outline his options. They spoke in careful, measured tones about custody rights, paternity establishment, visitation schedules. He wasn't listening. His mind was in a small apartment across town, where 3 boys who didn't know his name were probably eating breakfast, fighting over toys, living lives he'd missed every single second of. 4 years. He'd missed 4 years. First steps, first words, first birthdays. All of it gone, stolen by a woman who thought she was protecting them from him. Maybe she was right. The thought came unbidden, unwelcome. He pushed it away. "Mr. Kang?" The lead attorney, Stevens, was watching him carefully. "Do you want us to proceed with the petition?" Dehan's fingers drummed once against the table. A small gesture. But in his world, small gestures meant everything. "No." Stevens blinked. "Sir?" "I said no." Dehan stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Not yet. With all due respect, the longer you wait, the more difficult. I'm aware." His voice was soft, final. "Give me 2 weeks." The lawyers exchanged glances but didn't argue. They knew better. When Dehan left the office, his head of security, Jay, was waiting by the car. "Where to, sir?" Dehan looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Zara was probably taking the boys to school, holding their hands, kissing their foreheads, doing all the things he should have been doing. Find out everything, he said quietly. Where they go to school, what they like, their routines, everything. Jay nodded. He'd been with Daehan for 10 years. He knew when to ask questions and when to simply obey. This was an obey moment. Zara knew she was being watched. She felt it every time she left the apartment. A car that followed too carefully. A man in a coffee shop who never looked up from his newspaper. Shadows that moved when she moved. Daehan's people. She should have been terrified. Instead, she was exhausted. The boys noticed her tension. Junho had started having nightmares. Minho asked 3 times if they were moving again. Tayo, the quietest of the 3, just held her hand tighter when they walked. Children always knew. On Thursday afternoon, she picked them up from preschool and found a black town car parked outside. Not hiding, not subtle, waiting. Her heart hammered. Her heart. She gripped the boy's hands and started walking the other direction. The car followed. 2 blocks. 3. Finally, it pulled ahead and stopped. The back door opened. Daehan stepped out. The boys froze. Minho's eyes went wide. It's Mommy's friend. Zara's throat closed. Daehan crouched down, same as he had in the park, bringing himself to their level. But this time, he didn't just look. He studied them, memorized them, like he was afraid they'd disappear if he blinked. Hello, he said softly. Junho, the bravest, stepped forward. Do you have a name? Something flickered across Daehan's face. Pain, maybe. Or longing. Daehan. That's a funny name, Tayo whispered. Daehan smiled. Actually smiled. Zara had almost forgotten what that looked like. It's Korean, he explained. Like you. Minho tilted his head. We're American. You're both. Daehan's gaze lifted to Zara. Your mother didn't tell you? Daehan don't... Zara started. But Junho was already bouncing. We're Korean. Like in the cartoons? Not cartoons, Daehan said gently. But yes, half Korean. From me. The world stopped. Minho blinked. From you? Daehan nodded slowly. Zara's voice came out strangled. Boys, go wait by that bench. Now. But Mommy, now! They heard the tone, the fear beneath it. Reluctantly, they trudged to the bench 15 feet away, close enough to see but not to hear. Zara turned on Daehan, her voice shaking. You have no right. I have every right. He stood, and suddenly he wasn't the gentle man crouching for children. He was the crime lord, the king. They're my sons. You can't just... I can. And I am. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I've been patient, Zara. I gave you space. I didn't drag you to court. I didn't use my resources to destroy you. But my patience has limits. This isn't about patience. This is about them. Exactly. His eyes burned. It's about them. And they deserve to know who I am. They deserve to be safe. Safe from what? His voice rose slightly, controlled fury bleeding through. From their father? From someone who would burn this entire city down to protect them? From your world, Daehan? From the danger and the violence and the... I would never let anything touch them. The words came out fierce, absolute. Never. She stared at him. At the man she'd loved. At the monster she'd fled. You can't promise that, she whispered. Watch me. For a long moment they just stood there. 2 people who'd loved each other once. 2 people destroyed by that love. Finally, Zara spoke, her voice barely audible. What do you want? Dinner. She blinked. What? Tomorrow. You. Me. The boys. His expression softened slightly. Let me take you all to dinner. Daehan? 1 dinner, Zara. Let me try. Something vulnerable crossed his face. Please. She'd never heard him say please before. She looked at the boys. They were watching curiously, whispering to each other. Every instinct screamed to run. But she was tired of running. 1 dinner, she heard herself say. And you don't tell them. Not yet. His jaw tightened. but he nodded. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock, I'll send a car. Then he walked back to the town car, paused, and looked at the boys one more time. Junho waved. And Daehan, the man who ruled an empire without flinching, waved back like it was the most important thing he'd ever done. That night, Minji came to his penthouse. She let herself in with the key he'd given her, her heels clicking against marble floors. She found him on the balcony, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at nothing. "You've been distant," she said. He didn't turn around. "I've been busy." "With what?" Silence. She moved beside him, elegant and perfect in the moonlight. "Daehan, we're getting married in 4 months. If something's wrong, I have children." The words hung in the air like smoke. Minji went very still. "What?" "3 sons. They're 4 years old. I just found out." He finally looked at her. Her face was carefully blank. Years of training in high society had taught her to hide reactions. "With who?" Her voice was measured. "Someone from before you. And she just told you?" "No, I found them." He took a drink. "By accident." Minji processed this with the precision of a woman who'd been raised to manage crises at country club brunches. "What are you going to do?" "Be their father. And us." He looked at her. Really looked at her. Minji was beautiful, intelligent, perfect for his public life. But when he tried to imagine growing old with her, the picture was empty. When he imagined his sons, the picture was full. "I don't know," he said honestly. For the first time since he'd known her, Minji's composure cracked. Just slightly. "Do you love her?" "I did. And now?" "Now I don't know anything anymore." She nodded slowly, set her champagne glass down, twisted the engagement ring on her finger. "I always knew," she said softly. "Knew what?" "That you weren't all mine." She smiled sadly. "You have this emptiness. I thought I could fill it. I thought being the perfect wife would be enough. Minji, but I can't compete with ghosts, Daehan. Or with children." She slipped the ring off, held it out. "Take it." He stared at the diamond. "You're sure?" "Are you?" He thought of 3 little boys waving at him, of Zara's terrified eyes, of a life he'd missed and one he might still have. He took the ring. Minji kissed his cheek gently. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Then she left. And Daehan stood alone on the balcony, the ring in one hand and his whiskey in the other, wondering if some mistakes were too big to fix. Or if maybe, just maybe, some second chances were worth fighting for. The restaurant was quiet, expensive, the kind of place where people spoke in whispers and every table was an island. Daehan had reserved the entire back section. When Zara arrived with the boys, they stared at everything. The crystal chandeliers, the white tablecloths, the waiters in perfect uniforms. "Whoa," Junho breathed. "Is this a castle?" Daehan stood from the table, and something in his chest twisted at the sight of them. The boys wore their best clothes, probably the only nice things Zara could afford. Clean shirts, combed hair. Minho's shoes were slightly too small. He made a mental note. New clothes, new shoes, everything they needed. "Not a castle," Daehan said gently. "Just dinner." Teo hid behind Zara's leg. Minho stepped forward cautiously. Junho bounded ahead with zero fear. "Do they have chicken nuggets?" Daehan almost laughed. "I'll make sure of it." They sat. The boys climbed into chairs too big for them, swinging their legs. Zara looked like she wanted to bolt. Daehan caught her eye. "Breathe. Easy for you to say." "No." His voice was quiet. "It's not." Dinner started awkwardly. The boys were shy at first, answering Daehan's questions in whispers. But slowly, so slowly, they warmed up. Minho told him about school, about his best friend James who could burp the alphabet. Junho showed him a drawing he'd made of a dinosaur. "His name is Chompy." Tayo didn't say much. But halfway through dinner, he climbed down from his chair and walked over to Daehan. "Can I sit with you?" Daehan's breath caught. Of course. The little boy climbed into his lap, settling there like he belonged, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Zara's eyes filled with tears. Dehan looked down at the small weight in his arms, at Teo's dark hair, at the tiny hands holding a fork, and felt something break open inside him. This was what he'd been missing. Not power, not empires. This. You're warm, Teo said softly. Dehan's throat closed. So are you. Across the table, Zara wiped her eyes quickly, but he saw. After dinner, the boys ran to look at the fish tank near the entrance. For a moment, Dehan and Zara were alone. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For this. For letting me. He stopped. Started again. For not running. She looked at him. Really looked at him. I can't keep doing this, Dehan. I can't keep pretending this is normal. I know. They're going to ask questions, and I'm going to have to answer them. Then answer them. And say what? That their father is... She stopped, lowered her voice. That you're... a criminal? He said it without flinching. A man who's done terrible things. Both are true. Then how can I... Because I'm also their father. He leaned forward. And I'm trying, Zara. I'm trying to be something more than what I was. People don't change. Maybe not. His eyes held hers. But they can try. Junho ran back over. Dehan, there's a huge fish. Come see. Without thinking, Dehan stood and let the little boy drag him to the tank. Minho and Tayo crowded around, pointing at the koi swimming lazily. Which one do you like? Minho asked. Dehan crouched down, studied the fish seriously. The orange one. Why? He's calm, doesn't rush, knows where he's going. Junho giggled. You're weird. And Dehan smiled. Actually smiled. So I've been told. Zara watched from the table. Watched this dangerous man, this crime lord, crouch beside 3 little boys and talk about fish like it was the most important conversation in the world. And she realized something terrifying. He wasn't pretending. He actually cared. Later that night, after Zara had taken the boys home, Dehan sat in his car and made a call. Jay. Yes, sir? I need you to do something. Anything. Dehan stared out at the city. Find the best family lawyer in New York, not for custody, for legitimization. I want my name on their birth certificates. A pause. Sir, that requires the mother's consent. I know. Do you think she'll agree? Dehan thought of Zara's face across the dinner table, of her tears, of the way she'd watched him with the boys. I don't know, he said honestly, but I have to try. He hung up, and for the first time in years, Dehan prayed to a god he wasn't sure existed anymore. 3 days later, Zara found an envelope slipped under her apartment door. Inside was a check. She stared at the amount. More money than she made in 2 years. There was a note attached in precise handwriting. For the boys, not a bribe, not a payment. Just what they should have had all along. Doctor. Her hands shook. She should rip it up. Should throw it back in his face. But Minho needed new shoes. Junho's inhaler prescription was expensive. Tayo's glasses were held together with tape. She hated that he was right. She hated that she needed this. She hated that part of her, a part she'd buried 4 years ago, was grateful. That night, she called the number on his business card. He answered on the first ring. Zara, the money is theirs, not yours. You don't owe me anything. Silence. Then quietly. Why are you doing this? Because I should have been doing it all along. His voice was rough. Because they're mine and I failed them. And I can't get back 4 years, but I can start now. Dehan, I want to be in their lives, Zara. Really in their lives. Not just dinners and supervised visits. I want to know their favorite colors and what makes them laugh and what they're afraid of in the dark. Her breath hitched. I want to be their father, he continued. And I know I don't deserve it. I know you have every reason to say no. But I'm asking anyway. And if I say yes, she whispered. What happens to your world? Then I'll change it. You can't just watch me. The same words he'd said before. But this time they didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like a promise. Zara closed her eyes, thought of 3 little boys who asked about their father sometimes, who wondered why they didn't have one. One condition, she said. Anything. You keep them safe, from everything, including yourself. Silence. Then, I swear it. She didn't know if she believed him, but she wanted to. God help her, she wanted to. The changes started small. A new apartment. Bigger. Safer. In a better neighborhood with good schools nearby. Zara protested. Dehan insisted. They deserve space, was all he said. The apartment had 3 bedrooms, 1 for each boy. Large windows that let in sunlight. A kitchen where all 4 of them could fit comfortably. A living room with enough space for the chaos that came with raising triplets. Zara stood in the empty space the day before they moved in. Her arms crossed, her heart conflicted. This is too much, she said. Dehan, leaning against the doorframe, just watched her. It's not enough. Dehan. They were sleeping in bunk beds in a room the size of a closet, Zara. You were working 2 jobs to afford that. His voice was gentle, but firm. Let me do this. I don't want them to think money solves everything. It doesn't. He pushed off the doorframe, moved closer. But it helps, and I have it. So let me help. She looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, at the man who was trying so hard to make up for lost time. Fine, she whispered, but we pay rent. Zara, I mean it. I'm not a charity case. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 500 a month. That's not even... Take it or leave it. She glared at him, but she took it, because pride was expensive, and her boys deserved sunlight. Then came the clothes, the shoes, the toys they'd never dreamed of. Junho got a bicycle with training wheels and a helmet covered in dinosaurs. Minho got a telescope that actually worked, along with a book about constellations. Tayo got an entire library of books, hardcover, beautiful editions of classics, and new stories alike. Zara tried to protest each time. Dehan ignored her. Let me spoil them, he said one afternoon while assembling Junho's bike. I missed 4 birthdays. 4 Christmases. Let me make up for it. You can't buy back time. I know. He looked up at her, and the sadness in his eyes was devastating. But I can try. And Dehan, the man who'd built an empire on fear and control, sat on the floor of their new living room every Tuesday and Thursday night and read to his sons. He started with simple books, Dr. Seuss, then moved to chapter books, Harry Potter, Percy Jackson. The boys would curl up on either side of him, Teo usually in his lap, and listen to their father's voice bring worlds to life. Zara watched from the kitchen, pretending to do dishes, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to be good at this. But he was. He learned their routines, their preferences. Minho liked his sandwiches cut diagonally. Junho only ate apple slices if they had peanut butter. Tayo was afraid of thunderstorms. And Dehan adapted. He carried Band-Aids in his pocket after Junho scraped his knee. He bought night lights shaped like stars for Tayo's room. He learned to braid hair, poorly, but he tried, when Minho wanted to look like his friend Marcus. Slowly, impossibly, he became part of their world, not as a visitor, as their father. 8 weeks after that first dinner, Minho asked the question. They were at the park. Dehan had started taking them every Saturday while Zara had time to herself, time she used to sleep or cry or just breathe, when Minho looked up from his sandbox castle and said, "Are you our dad?" The world stopped. Junho froze mid-swing. Tayo looked up from his book on the bench. Dehan set down the plastic shovel he'd been using to help build the castle's moat. His heart hammered against his ribs. He'd known this was coming, had prepared for it. But now that the moment was here, every word he'd rehearsed disappeared. Yes, he said simply. Minho tilted his head, studying him with those serious eyes. Daehan's eyes. Why didn't you live with us before? Daehan took a breath. Because I didn't know about you. Your mother left before I could find out. Why did she leave? How did you explain fear to a child? How did you tell your son that his mother ran because she was terrified of what you were? Because she was scared, Daehan said carefully. Of what? Of my job. Of the things I do. She wanted to keep you safe. Junho climbed off the swing and walked over, his small face serious. What's your job? It's complicated. Are you a bad guy? Tayo's voice was tiny, almost a whisper. The question pierced straight through every defense Daehan had ever built. He could lie. Could tell them he was a businessman, that their mother had misunderstood. Could paint himself as something clean and simple. But they deserved the truth, or at least a version of it they could understand. Daehan crouched down so he was eye level with all three of them. I've done bad things, he said honestly, his voice steady despite the way his hands wanted to shake. Things I'm not proud of. Things that hurt people. Your mother was right to be scared. But I'm trying to be better. For you. Minho considered this with the seriousness of a judge delivering a verdict. Then he asked the question that would change everything. Do you love us? More than anything in this world? More than your job? Yes. Then quit. It was that simple, that devastating. Daehan stared at his son, this 5-year-old child who'd just dismantled his entire existence with 2 words. It's not that easy. Why not? Junho joined in, his hands on his hips in a way that reminded Daehan painfully of Zara. If it's bad and you love us, just stop. Tayo nodded quietly. We don't want a bad guy, Daddy. Children saw the world in black and white, right and wrong, good guys and bad guys. They didn't understand empires built over decades. Loyalties forged in blood and violence. Enemies who would see weakness and attack like sharks scenting blood in water. They didn't understand that walking away from his world wasn't like quitting a job at an office. It was like trying to climb out of quicksand. But maybe that was the point. Maybe he'd been making it too complicated. Maybe the answer had always been this simple. Choose them or choose the empire. There was no middle ground. Daehan looked at 3 small faces watching him with hope and expectation, believing, the way only children could believe, that their father could do anything. Okay, he heard himself say. Minho's eyes widened. Really? Really. Daehan's voice was firm now, decided. I'll quit. All 3 boys crashed into him at once, wrapping their small arms around his neck, and Daehan held them like they were the only real things in the world. Because they were. Everything else, the power, the money, the fear, it was all just shadows. This was real. That night, after he'd dropped the boys back at the apartment, Daehan sat in his car for 20 minutes. Then he made a call. Jay. Yes, sir? Set up a meeting. All the lieutenants. Tomorrow night. A pause. Jay had been with him long enough to hear the weight in those words. Sir, is everything? Everything's fine. Just set it up. He hung up before Jay could ask more questions. Then he sat in the darkness of his car and thought about what he was about to do. Walking away from the life meant more than just stepping down. It meant making himself vulnerable. It meant trusting that the enemies he'd made over the years wouldn't see this as an opportunity. It meant risking everything. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Tayo's small face asking if he was a bad guy. And he knew. Some risks were worth taking. The meeting took place in the private room of a restaurant he owned in Queens. Neutral territory. Familiar ground. His top lieutenants gathered around the table. 6 men who'd been with him for years. Men who'd bled for him. Killed for him. Built this empire alongside him. Park, his oldest lieutenant, sat at his right hand. Jay stood by the door. Daehan stood at the head of the table and looked at each man in turn. Then he said the 5 words that would change everything. I'm stepping away from operations. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos erupted. You can't be serious. What about the territories we just secured? The Italians will see this as weakness. The Russians are already pushing at the borders. Dehan raised a hand. Silence fell like a guillotine. I'm not abandoning anything, he said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I'm transitioning. Jay will oversee day-to-day operations. I'll remain as counsel. But I'm done with the active side. No more meetings. No more direct involvement. No more... He paused. No more of this. Park stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Why? Because I have sons. So do I. So does Chen. So does half this table. And when's the last time you saw them? Dehan's voice was steel wrapped in silk. When's the last time you read them a bedtime story? Went to their school play? Knew their favorite color? Park's jaw tightened. He didn't answer, because he couldn't. I missed 4 years of my sons' lives, Dehan continued, his gaze sweeping the room. 4 years of first steps and first words and first everything. I can't get that back, but I can make sure I don't miss the next 14. You're choosing family over everything we built? Chen demanded. I'm choosing to still be alive when they graduate high school. Dehan met each man's eyes in turn. How many of us have that guarantee? How many of us will make it to 50, 60? Silence. Because they all knew the statistics. They all knew men in their line of work didn't retire. They died or went to prison. I'm giving you the same option, Dehan said, his voice softening slightly. Stay and help Jay transition things into legitimate operations, or walk away with enough money to start over clean. Your choice. Legitimate operations? Park laughed bitterly. You think we can just go clean, after everything? I think we can try. I've already started moving assets. Bought 3 restaurants, 2 nightclubs, a construction company. All clean, all legal. The money's still good, just without the risk. And if the families don't accept this transition, Chen pressed, if they see weakness and attack, then we defend. But we defend from a position of legitimate power. Dehan's voice hardened. I'm not making us vulnerable. I'm making us untouchable. You can't arrest a restaurant owner for racketeering. You can't seize assets from a legal nightclub. We go clean. We become ghosts. Untouchable. Park studied him for a long moment. This is really about those kids? Yes. And you trust Jay to run things? Dehan looked at his head of security, the man who'd saved his life 3 times, who'd never questioned an order, who'd been loyal when loyalty was a death sentence. With my life, Dehan said, and more importantly, with theirs. Jay nodded once, a promise. Park sat down slowly. If we do this, if we actually try to go legitimate, it'll take years. Then we start now. Some people won't accept it. Then they leave. Some might try to take over. Dehan's smile was cold, dangerous, a reminder that stepping away didn't mean becoming weak. Let them try. Because even a retired king was still a king. And some thrones didn't need to be sat on to hold power. When Dehan finally left the meeting 3 hours later, half his lieutenants had agreed to the transition. The other half had taken the severance package and walked away. Park stayed. You're really doing this? He asked as they stood outside. I'm really doing this. Those kids must be something special. Dehan thought of Minho's serious questions, Junho's fearless laughter, Tayo's quiet trust. They are, he said softly. They really are. Park clapped him on the shoulder. Then don't screw it up. I'll try not to. As Dehan drove home, to the penthouse that suddenly felt too empty, too cold, he called Zara. She answered on the 3rd ring. It's late. I know, I just needed to tell you something. A pause. He heard her moving, probably stepping out of the boys' room where she always checked on them one last time before bed. What? I'm out. She stopped moving. Out of what? The life. The operations. All of it. He pulled over, unable to drive and say this at the same time. I can't change the past, can't erase what I've done, but I can stop doing it. Silence on the other end. Zara? Why? Her voice was barely a whisper, Because Minho asked me if I was a bad guy, and I couldn't lie to him. Daehan's voice cracked slightly. And because I don't want to be the villain in my son's story. I want to be their father. He heard her breath hitch. I'm not doing this to win you back, he continued quickly. I know I don't deserve that. I'm doing this for them. Because they deserve better than a father who might not come home one day. Because they deserve someone who chooses them over everything else. Daehan, and maybe, his voice broke. Maybe I'm doing it for me too. Because I'm tired, Zara. I'm so tired of being afraid that every time I kiss them goodnight, it might be the last time. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. I'm tired of being the monster. Tears streamed down his face. He didn't bother wiping them away. I just want to be their dad, he whispered. That's all I want. On the other end of the line, Zara was crying too. What if they come after you? She asked, her voice shaking. The people you're leaving. What if they don't let you go? Let them try. His voice hardened for just a moment. I've made arrangements. The boys are protected. You're protected. Security on the apartment. Bodyguards you'll never see. If anyone even thinks about touching you or them. He stopped. They won't. I've made sure of it. Because even stepping away, he was still dangerous. Some skills didn't fade. Zara was quiet for a long time. Then, this doesn't fix everything. I know. I don't forgive you for the years we lost. I know. And I don't trust you. Not yet. I know. He gripped the steering wheel. But maybe someday you will. She exhaled slowly. Maybe. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. And for Daehan, that was enough. Get some sleep, Zara. You too. He almost said it. Almost told her he loved her. That he'd never stopped. But some words needed more than a phone call. So he just said, Good night. Good night, Daehan. The line went dead. And Daehan sat in his car in the darkness and let himself hope, for the first time in 4 years, that maybe some things could be rebuilt. Maybe some sins could be forgiven. Maybe some men could change, if they wanted it badly enough, if they had the right reason. And 3 small boys who called him daddy were the best reason he'd ever had.